Good evening, and welcome back to the Velvet Past. Tonight we are sailing north, away from the warm south, away from marble and sand, up to a colder, wilder edge of the world. A land of long fjords and longer winters, of pine forests and grey seas, where the sun in summer barely sets, and in winter barely rises. Tonight we are going to the world of the Vikings, but forget, gently, the shouting warriors of the films. Tonight we meet the real people of the North, farmers and fishermen, poets and traders, mothers telling stories by the fire while the snow falls outside. We will drift through 300 years of their world, how they lived, how they sailed, how they saw the stars. Slowly, softly, at the pace of a ship gliding home on a calm evening tide. So settle deep into the warmth of your bed, the way a Norse family settled around the long hearth fire on a winter night. Let the wind blow outside your window, and let us begin, where the Vikings themselves began, not with a battle, but with a farm. Picture a valley in Norway, more than 1,000 years ago. Steep green sides, a silver river, a narrow strip of flat land by the water. On that flat land sits a farm, a long, low house of timber and turf, smoke rising gently from a hole in the roof. This is home to most people of the North, not raiders, farmers. Inside, the longhouse is one great room, warm and dim. A fire burns down the center in a long stone hearth, and the smoke drifts up and out, blackening the rafters. Along both walls run low earthen platforms, covered with furs and woolen blankets. These are the benches by day and the beds by night. The whole family sleeps here together, and the animals often live at one end, their warmth helping to heat the house through the long, dark winter. There is no chimney, no window glass, no clock. Time is told by the light, and the light in the north is a strange and beautiful thing. In high summer, the sun rolls along the horizon and never quite goes down, the famous midnight sun, and people work and celebrate in a golden dusk that lasts all night. In deep winter, the opposite. The sun barely lifts above the mountains, and the darkness is long, and the northern lights ripple green and violet across the sky. The Vikings called them, some think, the shimmer of the Valkyries riding. Life on the farm followed the seasons, as all farming life does. Spring, the melting of the snow, the sowing of barley and oats and rye. Summer, the animals up to the high mountain pastures, the hay cut and dried, the endless light. Autumn, the harvest, the slaughter of animals that could not be fed through winter, the salting and smoking of meat. And winter, the long indoor months of mending, weaving, storytelling, and waiting for the light to return. And through all of it, the sea was never far. The word Viking itself may come from Vik, a bay or inlet. The Vikings were, in a sense, the people of the bays. The land of the north is thin and rocky and hard to farm, but it is laced everywhere with water. Fjords reaching deep inland, islands scattered like stepping stones, rivers running down to a grey and generous sea. For these people, the sea was not a barrier, it was the road. And to travel that road, they built the most beautiful machines of their age. Tonight, let us go down to the water's edge and look at a Viking ship. If you are still awake, come and run your hand along the hull of a longship. If you are drifting, that is perfectly right too. A ship is a fine thing to fall asleep beside. The longship is long and slender and low, curving up at both ends, sometimes carved into the head of a dragon or a serpent. It is built not from a heavy skeleton like later ships, but from overlapping planks, each one riveted to the next, springing and flexing with the waves like a living thing. A big longship might be 30 meters from end to end and hold 60 or more people, yet it is so light that its crew can carry it over land between two rivers or run it straight up onto a beach. It has a single square sail of heavy wool, dyed in stripes of red and white, that can drive it across open ocean at the speed of a galloping horse. And when the wind fails, the crew run out their oars, sometimes 30, 40 pairs, and row in a slow, patient rhythm, the ship breathing forward, stroke by stroke. There is no deck below to hide in, no cabin, no comfort. The crew live in the open, sleeping in leather bags on the sea chests that also hold their belongings and serve as rowing benches. To sail such a ship across the North Atlantic, out of sight of any land for days, took a kind of knowledge we have almost entirely forgotten. The Vikings had no compass. Instead, they read the world itself. They watched the sun's height at noon and the stars at night. They knew the flight paths of birds. A raven, released from a ship, will fly toward the nearest land and can be followed. They read the color of the water, the shape of the waves, the direction of the wind and swell. They noticed the clouds that gather over unseen islands and the drifting wood and weed that hint at a coast beyond the horizon. Some sagas speak of a sunstone, a crystal that may have helped find the sun's position through cloud. A good navigator carried the sea in his memory and passed it down like a poem. And on these ships, along these sea roads, the people of the North went out into the world. Some went to raid. That is the part everyone remembers. But far more went to trade, to explore, and in the end, to settle. Tonight, let us follow them out, gently, across the water. The Viking Age is usually said to begin on a summer day in the year 793, at a small island monastery called Lindisfarne off the northeast coast of England. Norse ships appeared out of the sea, and the quiet monks, who had no walls and no warning, met something entirely new. The raid shocked the Christian world, but for the Norse, it was simply the discovery that across the water lay places wealthy and undefended and reachable by ship. For the next 2 centuries, Norse seafarers ranged astonishingly far. They rowed up the rivers of England and France. They founded a great trading city at Dublin and settled across northern England. A Norse leader named Rollo was granted a stretch of northern France that still bears their name, Normandy, the land of the Northmen. And his descendants would, in time, sail the other way and conquer England in 1066. The threads of history knot together softly in the dark, but the raids are only the loud part of the story. And the North was never only raiders. Follow the Vikings east, and you find them as traders and travelers along the great rivers of what is now Russia and Ukraine, carrying furs and amber and honey down toward the markets of the south. These Eastern Norse were called the Rus, and their name, some believe, settled onto the land itself and became Russia. They traveled all the way to the golden city of Constantinople, where the emperor was so impressed by these towering northerners that he hired them as his personal bodyguard, the famous Varangian Guard. Imagine that, a farm boy from a Norwegian fjord standing in silk beside the throne of the Roman emperor 1,000 miles from home. And follow the Vikings west, and you find the part of their story that is perhaps the most wonderful of all. Not war, but exploration into the empty ocean. Stay warm and drowsy now, because this is a story to drift away on. The story of people sailing, in open boats, into a sea that no one had crossed, simply to see what was there. First they found the Faroe Islands, green and windswept, and settled them. Then, around the year 870, they reached a large, empty island of fire and ice near the Arctic Circle. They called it, honestly, Iceland, and it was one of the last habitable lands on Earth to receive human beings. Families loaded their ships with animals and timber and sailed out to build farms under its volcanoes. And there, in Iceland, far from kings, these settlers did something remarkable. They created one of the world's first parliaments, the Althing, where free men gathered once a year on a plain of black rock to make laws and settle disputes, in the open air, under the enormous sky. And it was from Iceland that they sailed on, still westward. A quick-tempered man named Eric the Red, exiled from Iceland for killing, sailed west and found another vast land, cold but with green meadows along its southern shore. Hoping to attract settlers, he gave it a beautiful and only slightly dishonest name, Greenland. Farms rose along its fjords, and the Norse lived there for 400 years. And from Greenland, around the year 1000, they took the final step. Eric the Red's son, Leif Erikson, sailed still further west, following rumors of a coast seen by a storm-blown trader, and landed on the shores of North America. 500 years before Columbus, Norse feet walked on a beach in what is now Canada. They found forests and wild grapes, and rivers full of salmon, and they built a small settlement, and they called the new land Vinland. We know this is true because archaeologists found their turf houses at a place called Lance or Meadows, with Norse iron rivets in the soil. The people of the northern fjords had reached the New World, and then, quietly, sailed home and mostly let it go. Let that settle over you like a warm blanket. Ordinary people in open wooden boats, feeling their way across the whole width of the Atlantic Ocean, guided by birds and stars and the color of the sea. And what of their inner world? What did these travelers believe as they lay under those same stars? Their imagination was as vast as their voyages. They pictured the universe as a great tree, Yggdrasil, an immense ash whose roots and branches held all the worlds together. The realm of the gods, the realm of humans, the realm of giants, the realm of the dead. Among the roots sat 3 women who wove the fates of all living things. Their gods were not distant and perfect, but vivid and flawed and human. Odin, the one-eyed wanderer, who gave his eye for wisdom and hung himself on the world tree to learn the secret of the runes. The god of poetry as much as of war. Thor, red-bearded and enormous, driving his goat-drawn chariot across the thunderclouds. The friend of ordinary farmers, swinging his hammer against the giants of frost and chaos. Freya, goddess of love and of gold, who wept tears of red gold for her wandering husband. And clever, dangerous Loki, the trickster, whose mischief would one day help bring about the end of the world. For the Norse believed the world would end in Ragnarok, a final winter and a last great battle, in which many of the gods themselves would fall. But they believed too that afterward the earth would rise again, green and new, from the sea, that 2 humans would survive, sheltered in the world tree, to begin again, and that the sun would have a daughter as bright as herself to light the new world. Even their story of the end held, folded quietly inside it, a promise of the morning. They loved words as much as they loved the sea. In the long winter darkness, in the firelight of the longhouse, they told and retold the sagas, long, calm, understated stories of families and feuds and voyages, told in a plain and beautiful style that still feels startlingly modern. And they made poetry a treasured art, prizing clever, riddling verses and keeping in memory the great deeds of their people. A society with no printed books held whole libraries in its head and passed them down, voice to voice, generation to generation, beside the fire. And then, slowly, gently, the Viking Age drew to a close. Not with a catastrophe, but with a settling. Over the centuries, the Norse kingdoms became Christian, their kings crowned in stone churches. The raiders became landholders, the traders became townsfolk. The pagan gods faded into folk tales and place names and the days of our week. Tuesday for the god Tyr, Wednesday for Woden or Odin, Thursday for Thor, Friday for Freya. The longships were pulled up onto the shore for the last time, and the great voyages became stories told to children. But the North did not vanish. It is still with us, quietly, everywhere. It is in those days of the week. It is in hundreds of English words: sky, window, knife, egg, husband, happy, and the very word law. It is in the parliament that still meets in Iceland, the oldest in the world. It is in the shape of the English language, and the blood of half of Europe, and the name of Russia, and the map of the North Atlantic. And it is in a certain feeling of a small, warm room, and a long, dark night, and a story told against the winter. Somewhere far to the north tonight, the sea is moving slowly in the dark. The northern lights are perhaps out over the mountains. In a valley, by a fjord, the ghost of a longhouse holds the memory of a fire, and a family, and a voice telling a tale until everyone had drifted off to sleep. The ship is drawn up on the shore. The sail is furled. The fire has burned down to embers, and the long night has come. And there is nothing at all that you need to do but rest. Thank you for sailing the northern seas with me tonight, here on the Velvet Past. Sleep well.